Okay, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to those of you who are introducing yourselves in the chat. Welcome to the second session of our Executive Leadership DEIA training. I want to thank you all, to those of you who took the time to review Megan's follow-up email and commit to specific actions following the training. Some of you pledged to watch the How to Become an Inclusive Leader TED Talk video and engage in self-reflection, which is wonderful. Before we begin today's session, first I want to acknowledge the great work that you all as leaders are doing. We understand that many of you are committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility within OWCP and are eager to enhance our workplace environment. Some of you have noteworthy accomplishments in this area, and we are so grateful for that. So thank you for your continuous commitment. Next, I want to reflect on our first training session. Through conversations with program heads and other attendees, and after reviewing the post-training survey, we learned about some areas for improvement. And so we value your feedback tremendously, and we really have taken the time out to have discussions about this training today. So we're committed to supporting you, to hearing you, and to working through this learning process together. So after discussions and reviewing the survey, we've implemented a few changes. One of those, which is obvious, is the transition back over to Microsoft Teams, which our agency is more familiar with. So as a segue into the training, because I don't want to take up too much of our time, we listened and we sought to understand. And today we're actually talking about active listening and empathy. So I hope that you're able to approach today's training with an open mind and commitment to fostering a supportive and understanding workplace. And so now I'll turn it over to Dr. Megan Pollock.
Good afternoon and good morning, wherever you are today. I'm excited to be back with you again. It's been a few months. I do want to continue to offer my sincerest apologies for the technical hiccups that we had in our first meeting and then again in the second. But today promises to be much easier and we're going to have it together today. So again, my name is Megan Pollock. I am the founder of Engineering Inclusion, and I get to work with organizations and institutions across the globe to intentionally and systematically engineer equity and inclusion into organizations. And I come to this work as an engineer, as an educator, really with a mindset of how do we create cultures and climates of inclusion and belonging. You'll also see today my colleague, she's going to be helping me in the chat, Elizabeth Johnson. She's my communications manager, and so she's going to be really supporting us in the chat today. And so if you do have any technical difficulties, I invite you to message her as I'll be teaching, and so she'll be able to support you and hopefully finding some solutions to that. So what is it that we're going to be doing today? We've got three sort of key topics that we're going to be talking about, mainly empathy, listening, and then culturally intelligent communication. And then we're going to map all of that back to the work that we did a few months ago. And so first is we're going to talk about how do we enhance empathy, understanding, and skills. And so we're going to talk about some of the key qualities of empathy and how to apply these within your work setting. Next, we're going to talk about listening. You know, it's one of the most basic human skills that many of us didn't get formal training on. And so we're going to talk about what some of the literature tells us on how to be the best listener. And then we're going to apply this to another framework on culturally intelligent communication that's going to be a great tool for helping you relate to your colleagues and your clients and the people that you serve. So as a reminder, I want to sort of help us establish some group norms and ways that we can operate today. I'd like to call it sort of like a session pledge of how we want to operate, but they're just shared agreements, guidelines that I hope that will resonate with you and help you to kind of set some intentions for how you want to show up in the space today. So first is we want to stay engaged. So for the benefit of ourselves and others, we want to choose to be present and involved. I encourage you to do the best that you can in closing those apps or putting away devices or anything that can distract you from an optimal experience. And it's not only that we want you to be fully present so that you can learn, it's that we want you to be fully present so that you can contribute, because your knowledge and your skills add to the space. And so we want you to be present in that way. Just like we're going to be learning today, we want to practice that as we're learning. How do we actively and empathically listen and trust that others are going to do the same for us? And this is the last one here is a constant challenge for me of resisting overloading and rushing the agenda. And hopefully I've created a learning experience for you that will help us frame the day and not feel too rushed, although it's inevitable that breakout rooms could always be hours long of conversation and they will be short. But what we hope that you'll take away from this is our goal in this learning experience is to start the conversation. We hope that you'll be able to continue talking about these things with your colleagues. And so we do acknowledge that there may be some feeling of rushing as we close out those really rich, assuredly rich conversations in your breakout rooms. Next is we want to make sure that we share the mic. Everybody's voice matters. So especially when you're in the breakout rooms, we won't be able to monitor all the breakout rooms. And so we depend on you to draw participants in from the margins and make sure that quiet voices are invited to participate. Next is that we want to be really supportive of each other. We are all on a journey to becoming equitable and inclusive leaders and practitioners. And so we need to be thoughtful and caring and patient with people wherever they are on that continuum. And so we want to help others navigate the content with patience, kindness, and respect. I invite you to ask for clarification when you don't understand. And we always to create a safe space, a psychological safety, which is one of the first topics we'll talk about, is we must reject stereotypes, prejudice, and bias and focus on unfiltered evidence. And then finally, my last suggested group norm for us is to stretch and reflect. So all of us are accountable for our words and actions, me, you, each and every one of us. And so we want to keep that in mind as we're having conversations with one another. And we want to believe that we can learn and improve our practice. There's something that each and every one of us can take away from the learning experience today. And so finally, another kind of key reminder to situate how we're going to engage today is that I love referring to what was popularized by Stephen Covey as the spheres of influence. So we've done our best and we receive your feedback to be able to take the scenarios that we've created and really customize them to your needs. But it's impossible that every scenario is going to be 100% meaningful for everyone. And so we want you to sort of focus on what you can control and what you can influence, extrapolate what you can, and apply that to your learning in the best way possible. And there are things that we may talk about today that you care about, but you can't control and you can't influence them. And so that's where I want to invite you to really sort of reel yourself back in and focus on those things that we can control. So let's first talk about psychological safety. So psychological safety is a concept within organizational behavior, and it's defined as a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. It's about feeling safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of others. In psychologically safe workplaces, employees feel comfortable expressing themselves without fear or of negative consequences to their self-image, to their status, or their career. And why this is important is we relate it back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a psychological theory that was proposed by Abraham Maslow in his 1943 paper, A Theory of Human Motivation. And so this theory is often depicted as a pyramid with the most fundamental levels of human needs at the bottom and the need for self-actualization at the top. And so these levels are from bottom to top: physiological needs. So those are like those basic life needs like food, water, warmth, and rest. Safety needs, security and safety, both physical and economic. Love and belonging. This is the intimate relationships and friendships, a sense of connection with others. Next are esteem needs, prestige and feeling of accomplishment and respect from others. And then self-actualization, the very tip top. This is achieving one's fullest potential, including creative activities. So psychological safety, it primarily relates to the second level of Maslow's hierarchy, safety needs. While this level traditionally includes physical and economic security, it also encompasses emotional safety, which is where psychological safety fits in. So in a work environment, when an individual's safety needs are met, they feel secure and safe, and not just physically, but also emotionally. And so this sense of emotional safety is really key to experiencing and sort of showing up as your fullest self. So in the absence of psychological safety in the workplace, employees may feel threatened or insecure, hindering their ability to collaborate, innovate, and engage and meaningfully in their work. And this can in turn prevent them from progressing forwards towards higher level needs such as esteem and self-actualization. And so the sort of tying all this up in a bow, psychological safety is a foundational element in creating an environment where employees not only feel secure, but are also able to grow, contribute effectively, and fulfill their potential, which aligns with higher levels of Maslow's pyramid. And so the reasons why we need to facilitate psychological safety in the sense of belonging in the workplace is because one, it enhances collaboration and innovation. So when employees feel psychologically safe, they are more likely to share ideas, speak up, and collaborate. This open communication fosters creativity and innovation as people feel free to think outside the box and propose new solutions without fear of ridicule or punishment. Next is it improves employee engagement and productivity. So a workplace where individuals feel they belong and are safe to express themselves leads to higher levels of employee engagement. This is what we want, right? Engaged employees are more motivated, they put in the extra effort, and are generally more productive. Next is it supports psychological safety. It supports diversity and inclusion. So psychological safety supports diversity and inclusion. So psychological safety and belonging are essential for true diversity and inclusion. Employees from diverse backgrounds will feel valued and included only when they perceive that their unique perspectives are welcomed and respected, which is a hallmark of a psychologically safe environment. Next is it reduces turnover and attracts talent. So work environments characterized by high levels of psychological safety and a sense of belonging tend to have lower employee turnover. Additionally, such workplaces are attractive to potential employees, especially those who value collaborative and supportive work cultures. Next is it facilitates learning and growth. So employees are more likely to take risks, make mistakes, and learn from them. It promotes employee well-being. It allows people to contribute psychological safety and belonging contribute significantly to the mental and emotional well-being of our employees. So this means that workers are less likely to experience stress and burnout and job-related anxiety in a supportive and safe environment. It enhances team resilience and adaptability. This means that teams that feel safe and connected are better equipped to handle challenges and adapt to change. They can navigate uncertainties and bounce back from setbacks more effectively. It improves communication and conflict resolution. It builds trust within the organization, and it aligns with human needs and values. So in summary, psychological safety and a sense of belonging are not just beneficial, but essential. They are essential for a healthy, productive, and innovative workplace. They are key to creating an environment where employees can thrive and contribute to their fullest potential. So how do we do that? That's what we're going to be talking about today. So first is we want to learn to practice empathy. Second is we want to learn to listen actively. And third, we want to learn to communicate with cultural intelligence. So we're going to dive in first with some empathic listening strategies. And so you should have all received an email, a PDF for today's workshop. Elizabeth, if you'll drop that back in the chat, that will help our participants, or you all can comb through your emails from Paige to access this. This is going to be a great guide for our conversation today. So you'll be able to follow along. I'll do my best to point you to the exact page that we're referring to as we go along, but you'll see that it's got some of the scenarios that we're talking about and some of the definitions as well. Okay, so we're going to start on page 2 of your handout. So first, before we can really talk about empathy, we need to define what it is and to talk about how it's different than kindness. So kindness is the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate. And it's different than empathy because empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. It's connecting to the emotion of another person that another person is experiencing and not necessarily the actual experience. And so empathy, as Dr. Brene Brown says, she says, empathy fuels connection, whereas sympathy drives disconnection. So empathy and sympathy are different. Empathy is a skill that can bring people together and make people feel included, while sympathy creates an uneven power dynamic and could lead to more isolation and disconnection. And so I have a really short video that I want to show you that gives the difference between empathy and sympathy. And so hopefully we don't have any sound issues, but if we do, let me know.
I don't hear anything. I don't know if anyone else can hear.
Good call out.
Connection, sympathy drives disconnection.
I can hear now.
Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no. You want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
All right, so welcome back. So I understand that some of you are having trouble downloading the handout from the chat. I'm not sure why that's happening, but Paige says that you can find the PDF in the meeting invitation. So if you want to check that, then you'll have the resource for today. Otherwise, I can, let me see.
It might also be due to you being from a different organization, Megan, so I'll try to post it in the chat as well, but you can also find it in the meeting invitation.
I'm going to copy I don't know if this is going to work, but I copied a Dropbox link there. Hopefully that can allow people to access it. Probably going to change the setting so people can see it. You should be able to access it there. Okay. All right. So one of the things that she outlined in this video were the 4 qualities of empathy by nursing scholar Teresa Wiseman. So she talks about perspective taking first. And so This is the ability to see the world as another person sees it. It's not about agreeing with the perspective, but it's about understanding it. So it involves putting oneself in someone else's shoes and looking at the situations or problems from their viewpoint. So in the workplace, this might involve a manager understanding the challenges faced by an employee or a team member, understanding a colleague's viewpoint in a project discussion. I have an example from trying to understand your audience. So maybe a client is frustrated due to a delay in processing their compensation claim. So instead of focusing solely on procedural requirements, you take a moment to consider their situation from their perspective. You understand that behind their frustration lies financial stress, uncertainty, and possibly pain from their injury. By acknowledging these factors, you communicate them in a way that shows your understanding of the distress caused by the delay, assuring them that you're doing everything possible to expedite their case. Next is staying out of judgment. And so this quality emphasizes listening and understanding without jumping to judgment. It's about resisting the urge to evaluate or criticize that other person's choices or situation based on one's own experiences or standards. So this could mean listening to a colleague's idea without immediately dismissing it. Another example would be recognizing emotion, another quality of empathy. And this involves identifying and acknowledging the emotions that the other person is experiencing. It's about really being attuned to the emotional cues, both verbal and nonverbal, that someone is expressing. And sometimes it helps to identify those things. Like I hear some emotion in your voice, and then try the next one is to connect with that, right? And so the final one, communicating connection, is this quality is about letting that person know that you understand their feelings and emotions. It's not just recognizing the emotion, but also conveying that understanding back to them, thus establishing a connection. So this might manifest in the workplace as a supervisor expressing understanding or support to an employee going through a difficult time, or a colleague offering support to another who is feeling overwhelmed. Okay, so let's do some examples. I'm using Slido here. So if you've never used Slido, Elizabeth's going to drop a direct link in the chat if you want to go from your browser, or you can open up the camera on your smartphone, hover over the QR code. It's the same QR code, so you're not going to need to rescan the QR code every time. The questions will just refresh. So I'm going to read a scenario, and this scenario is also in your handout on page 3. So it's scenario 1. So let's start with that one. So the scenario is an employee, Sarah, is returning to work in the public health department after a bereavement leave. Her team is aware of her recent loss and wants to support her. And so the sort of continuing scenario is that Sarah's manager arranges a private meeting with her on her first day back. During the meeting, the manager expresses sincere condolences and reassures Sarah the team is there for her. The manager communicates understanding and support, offering flexibility in her tasks and deadlines to ease her transition back to work. So I'd like to have your participation in this. So which quality of empathy do you recognize? So again, scan the QR code or go to the link that Elizabeth has put in the chat and answer the poll. So it's showing me in the top right how many people participated. Once we get a critical mass, I'll click it and it will show us how many the votes that you all have. So again, which quality of empathy do you recognize? All right, so we've got about 30 people have participated. Give you a few more seconds once you kind of get the app figured out. It'll be easier for the next ones. All right, so in this one, again, there are multiple things that could be happening. So most of you voted recognizing emotion, and then the other majority selected communicating connection. My perception here is communicating connection. So Sarah's manager is expressing sincere condolences and reassures her of the team's support, showing empathy and understanding for her situation. And so the manager's approach, this is hopefully it's making Sarah feel supported and valued and really easing her transition back to work. It helps in building a compassionate and connected team environment where employees feel safe to share their personal challenges. All right, so you got it now. Now we're going to do another scenario. So scenario 2, the context is this. In a city planning office, an employee, Maria, proposes a new approach to a long-standing process. Her idea is unconventional and differs significantly from the traditional methods. So the department head listens to Maria's proposal without interrupting or dismissing her ideas. Despite having initial doubts, the head asks constructive questions to understand her perspective fully and acknowledges the creativity and thought behind her proposal, ensuring that Maria feels heard and valued. So what do you think about this? Which quality of empathy do you recognize? Which quality of empathy do you recognize? So the highlighted quality in this scenario is staying out of judgment. So the department head listens to Maria's proposal without immediately dismissing it due to its unconventional nature, showing an openness to new ideas. And this non-judgmental approach encourages creativity and innovation on the team. Maria feels valued and respected, which can lead to increased job satisfaction and motivation. It sets a precedent for open-mindedness and inclusivity in the office. So the next scenario, a team leader in a government department learns that an employee, Alex, has been consistently missing deadlines. Instead of immediately reprimanding Alex, the leader sets up a meeting to understand the situation better. During the meeting, the leader asks Alex about the challenges he's facing and listens attentively. Alex reveals that he's been struggling with a heavy workload and caring for an ill family member. The leader acknowledges the difficulty of balancing personal and professional responsibilities and discusses ways to support Alex in managing his workload. So what do you think? Which quality of empathy do you recognize here? So in this case, the key quality demonstrated is perspective taking. The team leader actively seeks to understand Alex's challenges from his point of view, acknowledging the difficulties he faces in juggling personal and professional responsibilities. Next is the sort of the impact on the outcome is so by taking the time to understand Alex's situation, the leader can make more informed decisions about how to support him and manage his workload. And this approach likely increases Alex's engagement and loyalty, reduces stress, and fosters a more supportive work environment. All right, the last scenario, and then you're going to get to go into your breakout rooms and talk about this with your colleagues. So the scenario is this. During a team meeting in a government agency, an employee, John, seems unusually quiet and disengaged. His colleagues have noticed a change in his demeanor over the past few weeks. The team supervisor approaches John after the meeting, expressing concern and asking us if everything is okay. John shares that he's been feeling overwhelmed and stressed due to a high-stress project. The supervisor empathizes with John's feelings, acknowledging that it's normal to feel stressed in such situations, and offers to discuss ways to alleviate the pressure. So the last one is, which quality of empathy do you recognize here? Which quality of empathy do you recognize here? All right. So the quality displayed here is recognizing emotion. So the supervisor notices the change in John's demeanor and empathizes with his feelings of stress and overwhelm, acknowledging them as normal reactions. Recognizing and validating John's emotions can lead to a stronger trust and rapport between him and the supervisor. It demonstrates a caring and supportive workplace culture, which can improve employee well-being and productivity. So next, we're going to go into our breakout rooms for a short discussion on how we can reflect on empathy in action. The prompts I have for you are this: how do the empathy qualities contribute to building trust, understanding psychological safety, and belonging within a team? And then what challenges have you faced in practicing these empathy qualities, and how did you overcome them? So as I get the breakout room set up, I want you to reflect on your own responses to these questions first, and then we're going to put you into small groups to discuss, and then we'll give you about 7 minutes together to talk about these questions.
We talked about how it is great to have a team of different people with different backgrounds, because you can get things done and bring in different ideas. One of our participants, they have more of a direct contact with claimants and the claims examiner, so they are able to practice empathy every day because they have more face-to-face time with those individuals. I think in summary, all of us recognize the importance of all of these qualities of empathy, building trust, perspective taking, compassion, and but it's difficult. We also noted that after we build up that psychological safety and trust, if we break it, if something happens, it's going to be hard to rebuild it back up. So those are a few things that we discussed. Yeah.
Thanks, Paige. Something I don't think I highlighted enough is that empathy isn't something we are necessarily born with. It is a skill that we develop, just like everything else. And so it's helpful to have opportunities to kind of practice, because it helps us to learn how to sort of center other people's emotions and feelings and things like that. We've got some great contributions here on the Slido. So we've got, somebody said there's a challenging balance that as managers you have to strike between being empathetic and a responsibility to the agency's mission. I can understand that sort of challenging balance. Periods of higher workloads can make practicing empathy more difficult. With being remote, it means having to put more effort into making sure you recognize the emotions involved when you aren't face to face. And I'll add to that, Elizabeth, my colleague, and I were having this conversation yesterday of with my training as an engineer was very much, you just dive in, right? You get in a meeting, you dive in. We don't have the sort of, I always jokingly call it howdy doody time, because that's burning money, right? But that, because I've been so conditioned to that, I sometimes forget that, like, I need to have those moments of connection with people. And so for me, in order to practice empathy, is like, it takes extra effort, like, to remind myself, like, I don't have to just dive into this, that my ability to build community and psychological safety with the people that I am working with is just as valuable in many cases as getting to those action items. Because if I don't build that connection and trust with them, if they don't feel safe, if they don't feel seen, if what they're going through isn't recognized, it reduces their capacity to show up in their fullest potential. So there is a balance, and we have to sometimes prioritize and work against our grain, which may have been deeply conditioned. So other contributions say teleworking can be one of the challenges for showing empathy. Yes, especially if we're not sort of attuned into people's faces. If they're not showing their faces, that can be really challenging. And then we just don't see what people are experiencing. Showing empathy seems an effective method of encouraging team members to contribute. Difficulty when faced with hesitant or people who historically don't trust management. Yeah. Thanks so much for your contributions. And we'll have this as a history, and then I can share it back with Paige afterwards. So let's see, somebody else has a different set of skills are required in a remote environment, but extremely challenging. And so next we're going to talk about listening, which helps us to actually employ empathy by listening, learning to listen better. And then the next person here talks about that. Sometimes empathy on the listener sides can be taken too far. So there has to be a balance. You don't want to ask a ton of questions depending on the situation, especially if it's a very personal issue. Yeah. Yeah. And so empathy isn't necessarily about being nosy. It's about helping people feel seen. An example yesterday that happened, I'm in the process of adoption, and I have to get a health inspection, and I've been trying to track that down. And I talked to the person yesterday, and when she answered the phone, she was not really happy to answer the phone. She was like, "Hello." And I was like, "Hello, I need a health inspection." And so I just asked, I was like, "Are you okay?" And she's like, "No, I'm not okay. I just got really bad news." And so I just took a moment to say, like, I'm so sorry, and just trying to connect with her, right? Like, so she's on the receiving end of a service provider, and so it's also okay on whatever end you are to just listen in. And I wanted her to feel seen and heard, and not just about my business. And did I help her? Probably not, right? But did I help her sort of feel seen and acknowledged? And that was my hope, right? And so all of us can take little things. I didn't ask her what happened. I didn't think that was appropriate, but I just wanted her to know that I'm sorry, whatever's going on, and hope that for a positive resolution. And so we can all do that. So next, I want to dive us into another sort of way of thinking about this. And that's to look at, we all know the golden rule. So the golden rule is something we learned in kindergarten or sooner. And that is to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or to treat people how you would want to be treated. But when we think about this sort of framing, it's centering who, right? It's centering you and how you want to be treated. And somebody came up with the platinum rule. So the platinum rule says that we do unto others as they would want to be done to them. And this means that we treat people how they want to be treated. It's a version of the golden rule that calls for a more thoughtful approach when dealing with others. And so, how does one know how others want to be treated? The short answer is that you don't, not unless you make it your business to sort of ask or find out, or to be thoughtfully considerate of that. So now we're going to be talking about listening. We're going to be talking about listening and what it means for us and our work. I love this quote by Stephen Covey, where he says, "Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply." And so keep that in mind as we move forward. But I want you to sort of think of a moment now. Think of a moment, a time when you felt heard. What was unique about that interaction that led you to feel like the other person truly listened to you? How did you feel as a result of being heard? So think about that moment and just sort of hold on to it as we move into this topic on listening. All right, so first is there are 3 degrees of active listening. First is active listening is the ability to focus completely on a speaker to understand their message, comprehend the information, and respond thoughtfully. So unlike passive listening, which is the act of hearing a speaker without retaining their message, this highly valued interpersonal communication skill ensures that you're able to engage and later recall specific details without needing information repeated. So active listeners use verbal and nonverbal techniques to show and keep their attention on the speaker. This not only supports your ability to focus, but also helps ensure that the speaker can see that you are focused and engaged. Instead of thinking about and mentally rehearsing what you might say next, an active speaker carefully considers the speaker's words and commits the information to memory. And so in the book, Coactive Coaching, and this is on pages 4 and 5 of your handout, the authors of this book detail 3 levels of listening. And so first is internal listening. This answers that question, what does this mean to me? At level 1, our awareness is on ourselves. We listen to the other person's words, but our attention is on what it means to us personally. There is only one question: what does this mean to me? Including my thoughts, my judgments, my feelings, and my conclusions. Next is focus listening. Focus listening answers the question, what does this mean to them? In level 2, there's a sharp focus on the other person, listening for their words, expressions, and emotions. You're paying attention to context clues, not only what they're saying, what they say, but how they say it and what they don't say. You also tune in to what you perceive as their values, and there can be some danger here when it comes to bias and assumptions and things like that. But you're tuning into what you perceive as their values and how they look at the world. Level 2 is empathic, clarifying, and collaborative. And so again, the question in mind is, what does this mean to them? And then the final level of listening, according to the book Coactive Coaching, is to understand better what are all of the discernible elements listening to me. And this is one of the things that I learned when we first sort of went into full remote learning around, during early COVID, is that my capacity as a facilitator to activate global listening was basically erased, right? I can't, like in this case, nobody's sharing their camera. So I have no way of knowing what's going on. When you go into breakout rooms, I can't sort of wander the room and sort of hear what's going on, sense emotion, and connect with people. And it really, really affected me as somebody who wants to connect with people and wants to be able to understand what people need in order to answer that. And so this is super challenging in a remote space. So at level 3, you listen as if you and the other are at the center of the universe. You're receiving information from everywhere at once, often described as environmental listening. And the authors describe this as a force field that contains you, such that everything you can observe, see, hear, smell, or feel, it becomes a type of hidden radio wave that you can tune into and receive. So at level 3, you are sensitive to the subtle stimuli from the other person, including how they respond to what you say and the environment itself. So consider this like reading a room, monitoring how it changes in response to you and adjusting appropriately. So global listening includes tapping into your intuition, but it is essential to keep in mind that your intuition could be biased. So again, the guiding question for level 3 is to understand better what are all of the discernible elements telling me. So now we've got some scenarios that we're going to play out here. So again, these scenarios are in your handout on page 5. And so we're going to talk about these scenarios. We're going to identify examples of good or bad listening qualities that you observe. And then we're going to have another breakout to debrief this topic. So scenario 1, as Elena presents, David is preoccupied with his own thoughts about the policy's potential challenges. He interrupts Elena frequently, expressing his concerns and how the policy might impact his department without fully listening to her explanations. Some team members are visibly disengaged, checking their phones or looking at their laptops. They occasionally nod, but it's clear they aren't fully absorbing Elena's points. The room's overall mood shifts as Elena becomes increasingly frustrated and other team members appear disinterested. However, David doesn't pick up on these cues and continues to focus on his own agenda. So, using the Slido, think of and identify some examples of good or bad listening qualities that you observe. So you can again map it to the internal listening, the focus listening, or the global listening. So think about what you see. Okay, so examples of good or bad listening qualities: not paying attention, not picking up on social cues, repeating what is said, just listening without interruption. Mostly we see a lot of comments here about being distracted, not paying attention, playing on phone. He was only focused on himself and did not provide Elena with opportunity to fully explain. So he's also not practicing empathy at all here, right? So if we sort of bring in the empathy element, we see that he's certainly not practicing that as well. He's distracted. Good, good, good. So we're going to give you just another minute here to add on any additional comments, and then we're going to go to the part 2 of this scenario. So not listening, and all of us have the capacity to not be good listeners at times, right? How many times do you ask a question and then forget to listen to the answer, right? Oh, David, I'm so sorry. This has nothing to do with you. I didn't know you're going to be here to participate. We'll see if he can improve his listening in the next part. Okay, so again, Davis is focused on his own internal listening since he's preoccupied, not aware of dynamic with speaker and audience, disrupting the group. Good. Okay, so now let's think about, so his internal listening is a poor practice. So his preoccupation with his own concerns, he interrupts Elena without fully listening. He demonstrates a lack of open-mindedness and respect for the presenter's ideas. And the impact on this is that This behavior can discourage open dialogue, create a negative atmosphere, and prevent the team from fully understanding the policy's potential. Now let's look at part 2 of the scenario. After a break, David changes his approach. See, I just need you to hang on, David. He's not under attack now. He actively listens to Elena, maintaining eye contact, nodding, and refraining from interrupting. He asks clarifying questions to ensure he understands her points. The team members put away their distractions and focus on Elena's presentation. They notice her enthusiasm and dedication to the policy proposal. David and the team become more aware of the room's dynamics. They notice Elena's passion for the policy and her frustration when interrupted. David adjusts his responses, acknowledges her hard work, and encourages others to provide constructive feedback. So here, now what do you identify? Identify some examples of good or bad listening qualities that you observe here. Yeah, look at David. David's shining here. Okay, eye contact, paying attention for sure. Focused attention. And there's two sides to this coin, right? So who knows what was going on in David's life at the beginning of that meeting? He might have just received a text message that was bad news and he was distracted. And so if you're the person who's presenting, if you're the main character in this, Elena, then you also get to have empathy of like, it's not just that David doesn't respect you and that David's not listening. It could be that David's also facing something. So empathy is a two-way street that we get to practice. Excellent. So providing feedback, global listening, picking up on those verbal and nonverbal cues, active listening, very focused, excellent. Moving to global listening. So exactly. So here, David is actively listening. He maintains eye contact and he asks clarifying questions, showing respect and a genuine interest in understanding Elena's points. Connections to empathy here too is that, they're by paying attention, they're seeing her passion for this, and this could open up a whole other realm of possibilities for her and her performance to say like, wow, this is something where she really shines. Maybe we should give her more of these kinds of opportunities, right? So excellent contributions, everyone. Okay, so now we're going to reflect on our listening for another breakout group. And so just like before, I'm going to give you a few minutes to reflect on this individually before I open up the rooms. I'm going to shuffle the room so you have more people to participate. I'm going to kick the AI out. I'm so sorry I didn't catch that earlier. Excuse me. So again, in your groups, you're going to discuss these. So you're going to have this information in the chat. And it's also here at the bottom of page, or in the middle of page 5 in your handout. So you've got the instructions in a couple of different places. So go ahead and start reflecting as I get the breakout rooms opened. All right, welcome back, everyone. Okay, so let's take a minute to debrief this conversation before we dive into culturally intelligent communication. Whoops, I got a little ahead of myself here. Let's share some key learnings from your discussion. And again, I'd love for anybody to unmute and share some key learnings from your discussion. How did you reflect on listening and apply the 3 levels of listening to your own personal experiences?
Sorry, can
I? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
Can I share? It's okay. I just put my hand up. We had a good discussion in our group about, and we shared some specific examples about how having like video turned on versus not being turned on in meetings impacts our ability to see like body language and responses and impacts. Or when it's not turned on, like kind of limits the amount of exchange and like brainstorming meetings and kind of collaboration between folks. And could see like the pros and cons, how it benefited a meeting and hurt a meeting and our ability to connect with our colleagues when we were on video versus not. And also mentioned, just being thoughtful about like when we're on not being on video too much so that it's like the expectation and people are drained and they're not engaging, but being intentional and in certain meeting settings, it's really, really helpful to be on camera and be more leaned into the conversation. So, and we had kind of specific examples of how that helped and how it hurt different meetings.
Yeah, it's a great point. So like to create a truly inclusive workplace, like sometimes we just don't want to be seen, right? But sometimes we need to suck it up, buttercup, and be seen for the sake of our colleagues, right? So if you're the person who's like never on camera, there's a part of you that could be sort of robbing yourself of connection and robbing others of that connection. But it's also okay to protect yourself and just say, like, I just need to be on camera today, folks. Like, I'm zoomed out or teamed out, whatever you want to call it. And create that space. And then we get to practice empathy of like, look, I got it, right? I understand. And we can share those. So thanks for sharing that, Tyler. And I think that we can practice empathy and grace with one another and learning to express those needs when we need to be seen or we need to see others as well. Okay, so we've got some great contributions in the Slido, and anybody else is welcome to unmute and share as well. So lack of listening negatively impacts team dynamics. Empathic listening improves team dynamics when exhibited from the top up, and it flows down from senior leaders to middle managers. Yeah, and again, like I said earlier, like I can't express enough that empathy is empathic listening is a skill we have to practice, and we can demonstrate it and model it. And we can also, to be inclusive leaders, we need to model the struggle. Like, so say that David in that scenario, he could have stopped and showed up in the second part of the scenario and said, you know what, I messed up. I was not focused. I was not reflecting my values, but I'm going to stop and really be intentional about being present. It's also okay in great leadership to like highlight that and to hold himself accountable and to be transparent about that as well, because that gives everyone else the grace and the exercise of remembering, hey, we need to all be present the best that we can. Being remote allows for distractions that would be rude in person. It's so true, and we all fall prey to that. When some participants are focused on their mission and their agenda, not the mission of the organizations, the meetings can often be hijacked. The chat feature on Teams can sometimes distract from meetings as people are having sidebar conversations. Okay. Yeah, so great contributions here. Setting the tone to what to expect up front facilitates more involved meeting, particularly if you're told up front you'll be asked to comment throughout the meeting. Yeah, this is something I try to do with different clients and organizations. I think you all expected interactivity on this, so I didn't necessarily say that. But and I've learned with some meetings, I say like, look, if you are only in listen only mode, I sometimes ask people to put like an asterisk in front of their name. I don't know if you can rename yourself on Teams, but on Zoom you can. And so that gives me a cue that says like, we're not all depending on you to tune in, that you're letting us know that you are only able to participate in a listen only mode. So giving people the sort of space to do that is really helpful as well. I think somebody said, I think the internal listening is sort of subconscious. We don't even realize that we're listening that way. We can start a meeting or presentation by reminding everyone that it's human nature to internalize what you're hearing first and then think about how it will impact you. By pointing this out, you can invite people to consciously move on to focus listen. Yeah. Yeah, again, I think anytime we can model the sort of humanity and what we're doing, the better it's serving the humans involved. All right, thank you so much for your contributions. Now we're going to dive into culturally intelligent communication. And so this is in your packet on pages 6 and 7. So for homework, you all had an opportunity to look at the inclusive leadership development model. And you can see that when we employ these different elements, the culturally intelligent communication is one of those outcomes that we see, but it's also a practice, right? So we have to employ that practice. And so we're going to talk about what that means. So culturally intelligent communicators do what? They listen. And so I've come up with a sort of acronym here to help us remember what that means. So to become a culturally intelligent communicator, you must listen. So listen stands for learn, inquire, synthesize, translate, empathize, and navigate. So again, you're seeing that sort of empathy connection throughout here. And so each component of this framework is a step towards more effective and empathetic communication in diverse settings. So learn, what this means, this is actively learning about different cultural backgrounds, perspectives, and experiences. This involves seeking knowledge and understanding of various cultural norms and values and ways of knowing and doing and being. So what this looks like is you're seeking knowledge about different cultural backgrounds. The example would be a manager learns about Ramadan to support her Muslim employees effectively. Next is inquire. This means that you were asking insightful and respectful questions to gain a deeper understanding of individual experiences and cultural context. You're listening to learn, not to respond. You want to believe people's experiences and strive to set your ego and your intentions aside. This is the most important, one of the most important things to being a culturally intelligent communicator is to believe people when they tell us what they've experienced. How many times have you said this happened to me and someone said that didn't happen? Um, it happens probably more often than we feel comfortable admitting, but it feels, talk about not feeling seen or heard when somebody says, this is my experience, and someone says, nah, that can't be right. That doesn't feel good. So we want to believe people's experience, and that's a key part of listening as well. So an example of this might mean a teacher asks an immigrant student about their education experience in their home country. Next is synthesize. This is when you combine information and insights gathered from diverse sources to form a comprehensive understanding of cultural dynamics in your setting. And so to have a comprehensive synthesis, you must seek input from key stakeholders. And so an example here might be a healthcare provider synthesizes the cultural practices of different communities to offer better patient care. Next up is translate. Translate understanding and awareness into practical actions and strategies that enhance inclusivity and cultural responsiveness in your setting. So you want to verify that your actions, your efforts, and strategies are meeting the needs of marginalized populations. So an example might be an HR professional updates company policies to be more inclusive of different cultural needs. And then here's empathize, which we talked already about today, but this means that you're demonstrating empathy by genuinely connecting with and understanding the feelings and perspectives of others, especially those from different cultural backgrounds. We want to use systemic thinking, and Elizabeth can drop a link into the chat to some resources on systemic thinking to identify barriers that people may face. So an example here might be a counselor empathizes with a refugee family by acknowledging their unique challenges. Next is navigate. We want to skillfully navigate through complex cultural interactions and situations using adaptive communication strategies and behaviors. We want to practice authenticity, transparency, and openness. And remember that people need to feel valued, included, and heard to experience that psychological safety that goes back to the beginning point that we had. So an example here might mean a diplomat navigates a multicultural negotiation by being mindful of cultural nuances. So for this exercise, you're going to turn to the handout that you have. And so I have a scenario here with some background and situation, a challenge, and some points to consider. These are your discussion prompts. And the conversation here is sorry, this is not page 4. It's on page 7. So turn to page 7 in your handout. And so I want you to think about how would you apply the listen framework to understand the experiences of these people here, right? So you're looking at Jordan and you're looking at Maria's sort of scenario and seeing how could you apply the listen scenario. And so I want you to take a moment to read this scenario while I get the breakout rooms open. So again, this is in your handout on page 7, page 7, and then I'll get the breakout rooms ready to go. All right, welcome back, everyone. So we're going to debrief this conversation now and talk about some of the things that came up in your conversation. So what were some of the key learnings from your discussion? And I also, look, I am keen to take responsibility when I mess up on technology, but I think that y'all's systems are all rebooting because people were like getting kicked out. And so I'm so sorry that Teams has failed us again, but hopefully we're all back and here today. And so if you haven't had an update, hang on, because it sounds like everybody's getting that on your end. So we are doing this Slido here, sharing some key learnings. And again, I invite you to unmute and share some of the things that you talked about in your small groups. No need to raise your hand. You can just unmute and share some of the things that you talked about.
Well, one of the things we talked about was that it would be good to coach the claims examiner that spending that little bit of extra time affirming their feelings to start with could have saved everybody a tremendous amount of time. So there's a false economy in deciding we're just going to go with the facts, because then you still have to end up dealing with emotions anyway at some point.
That's a good observation, Jill. And I like the way of you describing that as a false economy. I like that. What else? We've got some contributions on the Slido. So hearing the claimant before stating what's insufficient or lacking. While Maria is trying to be heard, Jordan appears to be talking past her and talking about what is needed and not the why, and not likely in a way that is not technical and easily understood by non-claims professional claimant. Being present in the moment and using empathy to build the initial connection. They may have needed to ask some questions about what claimant did not understand. Talked about making human connection first before jumping in. Yeah, human connection goes a long way to sort of healing some strife. And if your claims examiners have any kind of protocols, like put that first of like make some connection, and it should be authentic, right? And it may not be initially easy, because especially if people are calling in, they may already be frustrated, they may already be in a hurry. And so really kind of helping to navigate those first moments of connection would be useful in a way that's authentic and genuine as possible. Somebody else want to contribute? See somebody unmuted.
In my group, we were talking about how Maria's issues that she found the communication impersonal and confusing. So earlier what was said is first you need to listen, because the caller will feel that you're actually understanding and hearing what their issue is. Secondly, we have a lot of templatized letters, decisions, and a lot of them incorporate language that not everybody might understand. So it's important to put yourself in that individual's shoes and to try to convey to them an explanation that they'll understand why their case was denied. The end result of the decision may not change, but having them understand why it was important.
Yeah. I admittedly have never dealt with the office of that you all have dealt with, that you all work with, so I'm getting some feedback. Somebody else wanting to contribute here? Karen, are you trying to add something here? Sorry, I was getting feedback. So I was saying I may not have looked at any of your forms, but in my experience in dealing with any kind of government or institutional agency, like they're not easy forms, right? They're not always easy processes, and they aren't always designed for everyone's ease. They're designed for a lot of times the institution's ease. And so, I think all of us can sort of certainly practice empathy in our own struggles in managing and navigating these systems. That's something we can actually connect with. So one group said we focus on how we'd apply the listen techniques, and the claims examiner pointing out the need to be patient and think about what Maria was going through. Staff should undergo trainings such as this one. Staff needs to take to heart that part of the responsibility. One important key to effective communication is to avoid the jargon. Yeah, so great contributions here. So if I link it back to the listen framework, learning about Maria's situation in depth, including her injury or background, specific reasons, learning to educate the team, ensure that the team members like Jordan are well versed in the typical challenges and emotional stress states of claimants, asking the right questions, creating channels for claimants to provide feedback on their experience so that you can, which can help in understanding their perspectives better. Synthesize would mean like summarizing and reflecting. So train team members to summarize key points during conversations with claimants to ensure mutual understanding. Encourage team members to reflect on the claimant's situation and feelings, considering how policy and procedures affect individuals personally. Translate would be, creating those actionable steps, translate that understanding of the claimant's situation into actionable steps that address their concerns. For example, offering Maria a clear step-by-step guide on what she needs to do next, or providing additional assistance. You could adapt the policies here. Consider if there are ways to make the process more claimant friendly without compromising on procedural requirements. Empathize, fostering an environment where team members are encouraged to express empathy. They could acknowledge the claimant's frustration and distress, as with Maria, and assure them that their concerns are taken seriously. Suggested here is like to move away from some standard form letters in sensitive cases and opt for more personalized communication that acknowledges the individual specific situation where reasonable. And finally, navigate. So working with claimants like Maria to find solutions within the constraints of the system, perhaps offering a direct point of contact for ongoing support. And again, training the team, providing continuous training and support for team members to help them navigate these challenging conversations, balancing empathy with the need for procedural adherence. So I want to just point out, we're not going to cover it today, but also in your packet, there are these 3 columns of tips for cultural intelligence. So I encourage you to read through those and see how you can apply those, and how your colleagues can apply those in their practice as well. So my slides. Okay. So again, pre-interaction, during interaction, and post-interaction. And so again, that's in your handout. So now we're going to move towards action planning. So how does this all tie together with what we've been learning? So when we met a few months ago, we talked about how cultural forces create organizational forces and how they are driving those outcomes and the symptoms that we see. And so this is in your packet also, the image here. And so for this last activity, what you're going to be doing is you're going to identify cultural forces and invisible dimensions, apply the listen framework, and then talk about some strategy formation. This has us with a 20-minute breakout. We're not going to have that much time. But I have also, for your convenience, provided you some suggested answers for this. And so this can help guide your conversation as well. And so if you would start reading through the instructions here, start reading through the instructions on page 9 in your packet. And then I'm going to put you back in groups for our final exercise. I'm going to give you, I'm going to give you 12 minutes for this conversation, because you've got 3 points that you're trying to loop all back together. And you're going to be, again, referring to some of the same scenarios that we've already looked at. So, sorry, it looks like I made a mistake. I didn't update the page numbers because I ended up expanding your packet. And so I apologize for that. So it's the scenario that we're referring back to is the same one that you just did, but you're applying the cultural forces, the listen framework, and then the strategy formation. So again, I apologize for the page number mix-up, but the scenario is the one in part 3. So it's this one right here. Okay. So let me get the breakout rooms back open. I'm actually going to keep you in the same breakout room since you've already talked about this scenario, and you'll get to finish the conversation with that same group. All right. Okay, welcome back, everyone, or hello, as Lionel says. Okay, so let's debrief this last exercise. So again, I want to give you space to share some of those ideas on the Slido poll. And again, remember that there are some suggested takeaways that are in your handout. So share with us some of the things that you learned and applying this across the different things that we've learned and how this could be useful to you and supporting your teams moving forward. Anybody want to unmute and share? Okay. Well, we're right up on time. So what I want to do, and again, reference the handout here. I've got some suggested answers that can help you apply this. But before you go today, I want to give you an opportunity to reflect on what you've learned before you go. So this Slido poll is going to stay open. But I want to get you to think about, before you go, what are 3 things that you've learned, 2 things that you'll do differently, and 1 immediate action item. So you can be thinking about that. If you don't have something to share from your takeaways, you can still share those. That's still open. But I want you to think about something that you're taking away today, something that you want to do differently as a result of what you've learned today, and 1 immediate action item. And we'd love to have you share that. So just take a moment to reflect, and then you can report out that key takeaway, 1 action item here just momentarily. Anybody again want to unmute and talk about the deep and the conversation you just had? See if anybody's added anything to the screen. No contributions here yet. It's certainly assured that we're sort of running out of steam at the end of this 2-hour training. So with that, I do want to encourage you to contribute to this last Slido poll. So share 1 action item takeaway that you're leaving with today. And maybe that's that you want to talk about some of these concepts with your colleagues, with your team. Maybe that's another way that you want to engage and employ the culturally intelligent communication, the listening strategies, the practicing empathy. I'm going to give everybody a few minutes to contribute here. And this is a report out that I definitely want to share with Dr. Brown, Paige, and her team so that they have this moving forward. And so potentially you all can talk about it in the future and have some friendly accountability with an action item. Although whatever you're contributing is not tied to your name unless you share your name on there. So I'm going to wait till we got a critical mass of contributions before I click to reveal all of those action items. So just a minute, we'll wait. While I'm waiting for a few more contributions here, Elizabeth's put into the chat a link where you can provide feedback to us. I will share that feedback with Paige. And it's possible that she may be sending you a separate evaluation. I can't remember what that plan is there. I'm sorry for not checking on that before now. But let's look at what some of these action items are. So the first one, we'll start at the bottom. Action item is to explore changes to procedures and processes. Listen to better understand first. Not all discussions need a solution for me. That's so true. This is a great therapy practice, is that when somebody comes to you with something, ask them, do I need to listen or do you want me to solve? That's a really simple question to help you approach that so that you're not in problem solving mode if they just need to be heard. So try that. Do I need to listen or do you want me to solve? And that will usually clarify that. And let's see. Think more. I plan to talk with your employees about empathy and listening, and you plan to work on your own skills. Yes, it's a great practice. I definitely encourage anything from Brene Brown. I love this book here, Atlas of the Heart. It's really powerful and understanding feelings and emotions and how they apply to everything. Listen attentively, listen and show empathy practice. Remember that you're talking to humans, taking a breath and breathing, mindfulness, more active listening. So I'm really grateful for your contributions here and hope that you'll continue to add those here. And with that, I'm just really grateful for your participation today. I apologize that Teams was kicking you all out. I have no idea why, and not this is your platform, so I'm sorry that that happened. Hopefully it was we'll make all future trainings better. But with that, I'm so grateful for your contributions. I encourage you to continue to practice empathy and practice listening and passing on those messages to your teams. And I encourage you to reach out if you have any questions. And again, please complete the survey. We truly value your feedback, and we'll use that for future trainings. So with that, Paige, I turn it back over to you.
Yes, thank you so much. And the Teams issues are on our side. I think we've had a new version of Teams downloaded and everyone has been having issues lately. So we thank you for your time. We thank you for all these resources that you've shared. Thank you, OWCP colleagues, and we will chat soon. Have a great day.